Oh, wow, what a couple beautiful Sitka spruce trees. I mean, back in the 1930s when my great-grandpa was a timber cruiser, he would have been absolutely stoked to find a couple gorgeous trees like this. You see, logging always has been, and always will be a really important part of the culture here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it's what built these towns, these cities, these economies that exist today. But if you were to go back to those same hillsides that my great-grandpa cruised back then, you'd see that most of them are covered in vast swaths of deciduous trees because despite our best intentions, we really had no idea what it meant to manage a forest properly, and not much has changed today. I mean, shoot, I remember in the 90s when the mill in the town I grew up skiing in shut down, and the mill in the town next to that, and even here in BC since 2010, we've lost almost 50,000 jobs in the logging industry. I mean, that makes it really difficult for people to have any sort of sustainable living, to raise a family, to have kids, to live any sort of quality life. But we're always going to need wood, even if the industry crashes again, for construction, for furniture, for fuel. So if we can't figure out a way to create sustainable jobs and economy, what sort of future are we setting ourselves up for? Now, at the same time the logging industry has been going through economic boom and bust cycles, which makes it really difficult to survive, our forests have been doing the exact same thing ecologically. You see, old growth forests contain a biodiversity of different species at different ages, as well as perform a multitude of ecological functions, all of which we lose when we cut these forests down and replace them with what is often a very tightly packed monoculture of genetically modified trees living in soils that spray with chemical herbicides on 70-year rotations. So beyond the scenic beauty of these trees, the ecological functions that they serve are pivotal to having a stable environment, and we're slowly starting to wreck that, like literally. This is leading to some of the largest continental-sized threats that we face today, everything from the spread of the mountain pine beetle to wild, uncontrollable fire seasons to all sorts of flooding, erosion, landslides. These are all direct effects of having poorly managed forests, yet nobody's talking about this, nobody wants to take the blame. These old-growth forest ecosystems are now at less than 2.7% of their historic numbers, which represents less than 1% of all the trees in the province, and they're still actively being logged today. Without these old-growth forest ecosystems to regulate our water, purify our air, stabilize our soil, act as fire-resistant stands against wildfires, and sequester carbon in an era of climate change, we've really got to start to consider what sort of world we're going to leave behind for our kids. We all want the same things: stability, jobs, economy that helps facilitate the ecological functions that we all need to survive. So how do we achieve them? The North American wood market for far too long has been oversaturated with high quality timbers from our original virgin forests that quite frankly we've never been paying the true value of. We've always been getting it for cheaper because of its seemingly endless supply, and this saturation has caused market prices to drop, which means less money's flowing into the industry in general, which has prevented people from seeking alternatives because of the assumed high cost. Yet, when all the old growth forests are gone, the logging industry is going to crash yet again because it's currently dependent on old growth logging in order to survive. All old growth logging really does is push off the inevitable reality that eventually someday we're going to have to figure out a way to how to successfully manage our second and third growth forests so that they benefit us not only economically, but ecologically as well. When it comes time to make any real change though, that age-old argument of loggers versus environmentalists immediately comes up, which just isn't true. I mean, the sad reality is that more jobs have been lost in the logging industry to technological advances like feller bunches than environmental laws or regulations ever have. I mean, if anything, those regulations have helped create more jobs by expanding the roster of people that need to be involved every step of the way. This is purely a stereotypical distractionary tactic used by the people up top to keep things the way they are. It's the government officials and lobbyists that benefit and get paid from massive timber sales, and the logging companies that pay them through destroying these lands with no obligation to fix them. It's the Jones brothers cutting old growth forests to pad their bank accounts before retirement. It's Weyerhaeuser monopolizing the market, destroying lands and cashing in on real estate deals, or Mosaic selling logs and jobs overseas. None of these folks actually care about the little guy on the ground in the woods, nor do they care about the future of these lands or the communities that depend on them, which is exactly why we need whole industry reform and regulations that actually look out for the future health, wealth, and benefit of not only these communities economically, but ecologically as well. This isn't loggers versus environmentalists, it's the people versus systemic wealth and power. It's holding our government officials and corporations responsible for their myopic actions. It's changing the status quo for a better tomorrow. So what can we do about this? You know, solutions are usually pretty good. Well, the first thing we can do is immediately and permanently end all old growth logging in the province to preserve their biodiversity and ecological function into the future. The second step is to end all raw log exports to foreign countries, which is basically throwing jobs and economy right out the window. We then need to retrofit existing mills in the province through benefits and subsidies so that they can handle smaller logs from second and third growth forests to create local milling opportunities, creating stable jobs and economy in our communities. Finally, working with these local communities and Indigenous nations, we need to dismantle the monopoly of big-ticket logging companies and instead establish smaller woodlots that are managed locally for the long-term benefit of these communities and the environment. Through extremely selective harvesting methods and long-term management plans, we can actually add old growth characteristics back into these second and third growth forests, which is not only going to increase biodiversity and ecological functioning, but also provide jobs and economy over the long term. By creating a new industry model rooted in a truly sustainable yield, an honorable harvest, we can seek to benefit not only our forests and the ecological stability of our future, but the economies of today and tomorrow in a way that benefits everyone and everything in society, not just those at the top. I know it sounds crazy because it looks a lot different from the way we've been doing things, but the way we've been doing things isn't really working out, so what's the harm in trying something new? It all starts with a phone call, a letter, a rally, a blockade. We need to stand together and call on John Horgan and the BC NDP and have them act today on these dwindling resources so that we can create a world worth living in tomorrow. God dang, what a beauty. If you're enjoying these videos, feel free to subscribe to my channel below, or just keep watching to keep learning, because the more you know, the more fun you're going to have next time you're outside in nature enjoying it. Sure is rad out here. There's so much green, you know? I've never seen this much green before.